My ex-husband disappeared after our wedding trip without explanation, left me pregnant. 7 years later he contacted me with the shocking truth about why he abandoned us and begged for another chance. This story involves my ex-husband Nelson, 38M, my current partner Ben, 34M, and my son Lucas, 7M. I am Beatrice, 32F. For context, 7 years ago, I got divorced under the strangest circumstances. My ex-husband Nelson just vanished one day and left me a note saying our marriage was over. No explanation, no conversation, nothing. He disappeared completely from my life while I was 3 months pregnant with our son. Now he has contacted me again and told me why he left. The reason is so bizarre that I still cannot process it completely. Let me start from the beginning. I moved to the United States from Colombia when I was 22 to pursue my master's degree in engineering. My parents stayed back in Bogota. They worked multiple jobs to pay for my education and always supported my dreams of building a career in America. After finishing my degree, I got a good job at a tech company in Chicago. I met Nelson at a conference in 2016. He worked for a consulting firm and we hit it off immediately. Nelson was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in my culture and background. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. The wedding was small since my parents could not get visas in time to attend. Nelson's family was there, and they seemed to like me well enough. The first year of marriage was wonderful. Nelson was attentive and supportive of my career. We talked about starting a family and bought a house together. Everything seemed perfect until we planned our first big trip together to Colombia in early 2018. Nelson had never met my parents in person, and I wanted him to see where I grew up. We planned a 2-week vacation to Bogota and some other cities. I was excited to show him my country and introduce him to my extended family. My parents were thrilled to finally meet their son-in-law. 3 days before our departure, I came down with severe food poisoning. I was throwing up constantly and could barely get out of bed. Nelson wanted to cancel the trip and stay home to take care of me. I insisted he should go alone since we had already paid for everything and my parents were expecting to meet him. I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to bond with my family without me being there to translate everything. Nelson seemed hesitant but agreed to make the trip solo. He promised to video call me every day and said he would only stay for 1 week instead of 2. I gave him my parents' address, phone numbers, and a list of places to visit. My mother was disappointed I could not come but understood my situation. Nelson left on a Tuesday morning. For the first 3 days, he called me regularly and sent photos of the city. He met my parents and said they were lovely people. My mother called me separately to say how much she liked Nelson and that he was asking many questions about my childhood and our family. Everything seemed to be going well. On the 4th day, his calls became shorter and less frequent. When I asked what was wrong, he said he was just tired from all the sightseeing. By the 6th day, he stopped calling altogether. I tried reaching him multiple times but his phone went straight to voicemail. I called my parents to check if he was okay, but they said he had not visited them since the 2nd day. Nelson returned home after exactly 1 week as planned. The moment he walked through our front door, I knew something had changed completely. He barely looked at me when I hugged him. He gave one-word answers to my questions about the trip. When I asked why he stopped calling, he just shrugged and said his phone had issues. That night, he slept on the couch without any explanation. For the next month, he was like a stranger living in our house. He left for work early and came home late. He stopped initiating conversations and avoided physical contact completely. When I tried to talk to him about what was wrong, he would say he was fine and change the subject. I started wondering if he had met someone else in Colombia, but that seemed unlikely since he spent most of his time alone. I considered that maybe my family had said something to offend him, but my parents insisted their interactions had been pleasant and brief. During this time, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told Nelson, he just nodded and walked away. He did not congratulate me or show any excitement about becoming a father. His reaction made me realize our marriage was probably over, but I had no idea why. One morning in late March, I woke up to find Nelson gone. All his clothes were missing from our closet. His car was not in the driveway. On the kitchen counter, there was a yellow sticky note that said, "We are done. I am filing for divorce. Do not contact me." I stared at that note for probably 20 minutes. I called his phone but it was disconnected. I drove to his office, but his colleagues said he had resigned the previous week. I went to his parents' house, and his mother answered the door. When I explained what happened, she looked at me with disgust and said Nelson had told them everything about me. She said I was a liar and a manipulator, and that I should stop pretending to be innocent. When I asked what Nelson had told them, she said they knew about my secret life in Colombia and that I should be ashamed of myself. Then she closed the door in my face. I was completely confused by her reaction. I had no idea what secret life she was referring to. I tried calling Nelson's friends and his brother, but none of them would tell me where he was or what he had said about me. His brother just repeated that Nelson had explained everything and that I should move on. For the next 2 months, I tried everything to get answers. I hired a private investigator to find Nelson, but he had apparently left Chicago completely. I called my parents to ask if something had happened during Nelson's visit that I was not aware of. They said Nelson had seemed like a nice man during their brief meetings and they could not understand why he would leave me. Eventually, I gave up trying to find him. The divorce papers arrived in the mail 4 months after he left. I signed them without fighting because I was exhausted and needed to focus on preparing for the baby. Lucas was born in October 2018, and Nelson never tried to contact me about his son. The years after the divorce were difficult but manageable. I threw myself into my work in raising Lucas. My parents visited from Colombia twice to meet their grandson, and we video called them every week. Lucas grew up knowing he had a father somewhere but understanding that the man was not part of our lives. In 2021, I met Ben through mutual friends at a barbecue. He was recently divorced himself and had an 8-year-old daughter from his previous marriage. We started as friends and slowly developed a relationship. Ben was patient with me about my trust issues and never pressured me to explain why my marriage had ended so suddenly. Ben and Lucas got along well from the beginning. He never tried to replace Lucas's father but became a positive male figure in my son's life. We moved in together last year, and everything was stable and peaceful. 3 weeks ago, I received a text message from an unknown number. The message said, "Beatrice, this is Nelson. I know you probably do not want to hear from me, but I need to explain why I left. Can we meet somewhere public to talk?" My first instinct was to delete the message and block the number. I showed the text to Ben, and he said the decision was entirely mine. He trusted me to handle the situation however I thought was best. I ignored the message for 2 days. Then Nelson sent another text. "I was an idiot and I owe you an explanation after all these years. I found out the truth about what happened in Colombia. Please give me one chance to tell you what really went on." The mention of Colombia caught my attention. I still had no idea what had happened during his trip that changed everything. After discussing it with Ben, I decided to meet Nelson once just to get closure. I texted him back and agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown the following Saturday afternoon. I told Ben where I was going and when I expected to be back. He offered to come with me, but I thought it was better to handle this alone. Nelson was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived. He looked older and thinner than I remembered. He stood up when he saw me and awkwardly asked if I wanted coffee. I said no and sat down across from him. He started by apologizing for leaving the way he did. He said there was no excuse for abandoning me while I was pregnant and that he regretted not talking to me about what was bothering him. I accepted his apology for his cowardly behavior but told him that was not why I was there. I asked him directly why he had left our marriage. Nelson took a deep breath and said he needed to tell me about something that happened in Colombia that I knew nothing about. According to Nelson, on his 3rd day in Bogotá, a woman approached him at his hotel. She claimed to be my mother's sister and said she needed to talk to him privately about me. Nelson was confused because I had never mentioned having an aunt in the city. This woman, who called herself Elena, told Nelson that I had been lying to him about my past. She said I was already married to a man in Colombia and had a 4-year-old daughter with him. She claimed I had abandoned my family to come to America and start a new life. Nelson said he did not believe Elena at first, but she knew specific details about my childhood that I had shared with him. She knew about the scar on my knee from falling off my bike when I was 8. She knew about my first pet rabbit and how I had cried for days when it died. She even knew about my college boyfriend's name and how long we dated. Elena told Nelson that if he confronted me directly about my secret family, I would deny everything and probably become violent. She said I had a temper and had threatened family members before. She offered to take Nelson to meet my Colombian husband and daughter as proof. The next day, Elena picked up Nelson and drove him to a house in a different part of the city. There, he met a man named Miguel who claimed to be my husband, and a little girl who supposedly was my daughter. Miguel spoke decent English and told Nelson that I had left them 3 years earlier without any explanation. According to Nelson, the little girl looked somewhat like me and called Miguel Papa. Elena had photos on her phone that showed me with Miguel and the child at various family gatherings. Nelson said the evidence seemed convincing, especially since Elena knew so many personal details about my life. Elena warned Nelson that I was probably planning to bring my Colombian family to America once I got my citizenship through marriage to him. She said I was using Nelson as a stepping stone and would eventually divorce him once my real family was settled in the United States. Nelson said he spent his last 2 days in Colombia in shock, trying to process what he had learned. He could not understand how I had managed to keep such a big secret from him for over a year of marriage. When he returned to Chicago, he could not look at me without thinking about my supposed betrayal. He said he kept waiting for me to confess about my secret family, but I never brought up anything unusual about my past. When I told him about the pregnancy, he assumed it was part of my plan to anchor myself in America before revealing the truth. Nelson said he finally decided to leave because he could not stand living with someone he thought had been lying to him from the beginning. He was too humiliated to confront me about what he knew, so he just disappeared. I sat there listening to this story with my mouth open. It was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. I told Nelson that I had never been married before him, had never had children before Lucas, and did not have an aunt named Elena in Bogotá. I explained that my only relatives in that city were my parents and one cousin who lived across town. Nelson nodded and said he had figured that out recently. He told me that Elena had contacted him again 2 months ago with a new request. She wanted him to help her daughter get a visa to come to America. When Nelson refused, Elena became angry and started threatening to expose some other secret about him. Nelson said Elena's desperation made him suspicious, so he started asking her detailed questions about me and my family. Her answers began contradicting what she had told him years earlier. When he pressed her harder, Elena finally admitted that she had made up the entire story about my secret marriage and child. According to Nelson, Elena confessed that she was actually a distant relative of mine who had been jealous of my success in America. She had heard about my marriage to an American man and decided to destroy it out of spite. She had recruited her neighbor Miguel and his daughter to play the roles of my supposed family. Elena had gotten personal information about me from my social media posts and from conversations with my parents, who had mentioned details about my childhood during Nelson's visit. She used this information to make her lies seem credible. Nelson said Elena claimed she had not meant for the deception to go as far as it did. She thought Nelson would just confront me about the fake family and that we would have a fight that might cause some temporary problems in our marriage. She never expected him to leave me completely. Nelson finished his story by saying he was sorry for believing Elena's lies and asked if there was any possibility we could work things out. He said he had never stopped thinking about me and Lucas and wanted to be a proper father to his son. I looked at Nelson and told him there was absolutely no chance of reconciliation. I explained that even if his excuse was true, he had chosen to believe a stranger's word over his wife's character. He had decided to abandon his pregnant wife rather than have an honest conversation about his concerns. He had allowed his parents to insult me and had made no effort to contact his son for 7 years. I told Nelson that I was in a committed relationship with a good man who treated me and Lucas with respect. I said Lucas was thriving and did not need the chaos that Nelson's presence would bring to his life. Nelson started crying and begging me to at least let him meet Lucas once. I told him that ship had sailed when he chose to believe lies about me rather than trust the woman he had married. I got up and walked out of the coffee shop. I drove home and told Ben everything that had happened. He held me while I cried from frustration and anger. Ben said he was proud of how I had handled the situation and that he supported whatever decision I made about Nelson's request to meet Lucas. Now I keep getting text messages from Nelson asking for another chance to explain himself. He says he wants to make up for lost time with Lucas and that he has learned from his mistakes. He has sent photos of gifts he bought for Lucas and keeps asking when he can deliver them. I have not responded to any of his messages. I blocked his number yesterday, but he started texting from a different phone. I am considering changing my phone number, but I worry he might show up at my house or Lucas's school. I know some people might think I should give Nelson a chance to have a relationship with Lucas, but I cannot get past what he did to us. He chose to believe the worst about me without any proof and abandoned his family based on lies. I do not think that kind of person should have access to my son. What would you do in my situation? Am I being too harsh by refusing to let Nelson meet Lucas? Update 1. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. The responses helped me think through this situation more clearly. I have been getting a lot of private messages asking for updates, so here is what has happened since I last wrote. Nelson did not give up trying to contact me after I blocked his number. He sent messages from at least 4 different phone numbers over the past 2 weeks. When I blocked those as well, he started emailing me from various email addresses. The content was always the same: apologies, explanations, and requests to meet Lucas. Last Wednesday, things escalated when Nelson showed up at my workplace. I was walking to my car after work when I saw him standing by the parking garage entrance. He approached me and said he just wanted to talk for 5 minutes. I told Nelson that I had nothing more to say to him and that he needed to stop contacting me. He said he understood why I was angry but that Lucas deserved to know his biological father. He claimed he had been seeing a counselor and working on himself for the past year. When I started walking toward my car, Nelson followed me and kept talking. He said he had been carrying guilt about abandoning Lucas for years and that meeting his son would help him find peace. I turned around and told Nelson that his peace was not my responsibility. Nelson then said something that made me reconsider everything. He told me that the woman Elena from Colombia had contacted him again recently with more information about why she had targeted our marriage. He said Elena had admitted there was a deeper reason for her actions beyond simple jealousy. I stopped walking and asked Nelson what Elena had told him. He said Elena confessed that she had been paid by someone to break up our marriage. When I asked who had paid her, Nelson said it was someone from my own family who wanted to prevent me from staying in America permanently. This information hit me like a punch to the stomach. I asked Nelson for more details, but he said he would only share everything he knew if I agreed to let him meet Lucas. I told Nelson that was emotional blackmail and walked away. I spent the entire drive home thinking about what Nelson had said. The idea that someone in my family had orchestrated the destruction of my marriage seemed impossible, but I could not stop wondering if it might be true. When I got home, I told Ben about Nelson's latest revelation. Ben was angry that Nelson had ambushed me at work and wanted to call the police. I convinced Ben to wait because I needed to find out what Elena had told Nelson about my family. That evening, I called my parents in Colombia and asked them detailed questions about Nelson's visit 7 years ago. I wanted to know exactly who he had met and what conversations had taken place. My mother told me that Nelson had only visited them twice during his week in Bogotá. The first time was the day after he arrived, when they had dinner together and talked about me and our marriage. The second time was 3 days later when Nelson stopped by briefly to say goodbye before returning to Chicago. My mother said Nelson had asked many questions about our family during that first dinner. He wanted to know about my childhood, my previous relationships, and whether I had any relatives living in the United States. My father had mentioned that my uncle Roberto lived in Miami and had been trying to get visas for his children to join him. When I asked my mother if Nelson had seemed upset or troubled during either visit, she said he had been polite but somewhat distant during the goodbye visit. She assumed he was just tired from traveling. My mother also told me something I had not known before. She said my uncle Roberto had called them the day after Nelson's first visit asking detailed questions about my American husband. Roberto wanted to know about Nelson's job, his family background, and how serious our relationship was. My mother had found Roberto's questions strange at the time because he had never shown much interest in my personal life before. When she asked why he was so curious about Nelson, Roberto said he was just looking out for his niece's welfare. After hanging up with my parents, I called my uncle Roberto in Miami. I had not spoken to him in over 2 years, and he seemed surprised to hear from me. I asked Roberto if he remembered asking my parents about my ex-husband 7 years ago. Roberto said he vaguely remembered the conversation but claimed he was just being a protective uncle. When I pressed him for more details, he became defensive and said he did not understand why I was bringing up ancient history. I decided to be direct and asked Roberto if he knew anyone named Elena in Bogotá. Roberto was quiet for a long moment before saying that Elena was a woman who sometimes helped him with paperwork for immigration issues. He claimed he had not spoken to her in years. Something in Roberto's tone made me suspicious. I asked him point blank if he had ever paid Elena to interfere in my marriage. Roberto became angry and accused me of making crazy accusations against family members. He said I had become paranoid since moving to America and hung up on me. Roberto's reaction convinced me that Nelson might be telling the truth about Elena being paid by someone in my family. I spent the next few days trying to figure out how to get more information without alerting Roberto that I was investigating him. I remembered that my cousin Carmen in Bogotá worked as a secretary for a lawyer who handled immigration cases. I called Carmen and asked if she knew anything about a woman named Elena who helped people with American visa applications. Carmen said she had heard of Elena through work connections. According to Carmen, Elena had a reputation for using questionable methods to help Colombian families get their relatives to America. Carmen had heard rumors that Elena would sometimes create fake relationships or marriages to help people obtain visas. When I asked Carmen if she knew whether Elena had ever worked with my uncle Roberto, Carmen hesitated before saying she had seen them together at a coffee shop about 2 years ago. Carmen said she had found it odd because Roberto usually handled his own paperwork. This conversation confirmed my suspicions that Roberto and Elena knew each other beyond what Roberto had admitted. I realized I needed to confront Nelson again to get the full story about what Elena had told him. I called Nelson from a blocked number and agreed to meet him again. This time I chose a public library where we could talk without being interrupted. I told Ben where I was going and asked him to call me in 1 hour if he had not heard from me. Nelson arrived at the library looking hopeful. I told him immediately that I was not there to discuss reconciliation or his relationship with Lucas. I only wanted to know everything Elena had told him about who paid her to destroy our marriage. Nelson seemed disappointed but agreed to share what he knew. He said Elena had contacted him 6 weeks ago asking for money. When Nelson refused, Elena became desperate and offered to tell him the truth about why she had been hired to break up our marriage. According to Nelson, Elena said my uncle Roberto had contacted her in early 2018 through mutual connections in the immigration community. Roberto told Elena that his niece was married to an American man and that this marriage was preventing Roberto's own children from getting help with their visa applications. Elena said Roberto explained that I was too focused on my own life in America to help my extended family with immigration issues. Roberto believed that if my marriage failed, I would return to Colombia or at least be more willing to sponsor other family members for visas. Roberto had paid Elena $5,000 to convince Nelson that I was already married in Colombia. Elena said Roberto provided her with personal information about me that he had gathered from my social media accounts and from conversations with my parents. Elena told Nelson that Roberto never intended for the deception to completely destroy our marriage. Roberto thought Nelson would confront me about the fake family, we would have relationship problems, and eventually I would divorce Nelson and be more available to help Roberto's children immigrate to America. Elena said she felt guilty about how far the deception had gone, especially after learning that I had been pregnant when Nelson left me. She claimed she had tried to contact Nelson several times over the years to tell him the truth, but Roberto had threatened to report her illegal activities to immigration authorities if she revealed his involvement. Nelson said Elena only decided to confess everything recently because Roberto had stopped paying her the monthly silence fee he had promised her. Elena was struggling financially and hoping Nelson would give her money in exchange for the truth about what had happened. I sat in that library chair processing this information and trying to control my anger. My uncle had destroyed my marriage and caused Nelson to abandon his pregnant wife because he wanted me to help his children get visas. The selfishness and cruelty of his actions was beyond anything I could have imagined. I asked Nelson why he was telling me this now instead of going to the police about Roberto's fraud. Nelson said he did not care about getting justice against Roberto. He only wanted to use this information to convince me that he had been a victim too and deserved a second chance with me and Lucas. I told Nelson that learning about Roberto's involvement did not change how I felt about his actions 7 years ago. Nelson had still chosen to believe lies about me rather than trust his own wife. He had still abandoned his pregnant wife without explanation. Roberto's manipulation did not excuse Nelson's choices. Nelson started arguing that Roberto's deception proved Nelson was not entirely at fault for what happened to our marriage. I told Nelson that being manipulated by my uncle did not make him a victim. It made him someone with poor judgment who was easily influenced by strangers. I left the library and drove straight to Ben's office. I needed to tell someone I trusted about what I had learned before I did something I might regret. Ben listened to the whole story and then held me while I cried from rage and betrayal. Ben said he thought I should call the police and report Roberto for fraud, but I was not sure what crimes had actually been committed. Ben also said he thought Nelson's attempt to use this information to get access to Lucas was manipulative and disgusting. That night, I called my parents again and told them everything I had learned about Roberto's role in destroying my marriage. My mother started crying and apologizing for not realizing what her brother had done. My father was silent for a long time before saying he wanted to confront Roberto personally. I asked my parents not to contact Roberto until I decided how to handle the situation. I needed time to process everything and figure out what steps to take next. Since that conversation, I have been researching legal options for dealing with Roberto's fraud. I have also been wondering whether I should try to get more evidence of his involvement before taking action. Nelson has continued texting me asking about when he can meet Lucas. I have not responded to any of his messages because I'm still processing everything I learned. Part of me feels sorry for Nelson now that I know he was manipulated by Roberto, but I still cannot forgive how he handled the situation. I keep thinking about how different my life would have been if Nelson had just talked to me about his concerns 7 years ago. Lucas would have grown up with his biological father. I might never have met Ben. The whole trajectory of our lives was changed by Roberto's greed and Nelson's cowardice. I am not sure what my next steps should be. Should I try to get justice against Roberto? Should I give Nelson a chance to meet Lucas now that I know he was manipulated? Should I just try to move on and forget about both of them? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 2: A lot has happened since my last update, and I wanted to share what has occurred over the past month and a half. I have made some decisions that I think were necessary, even though they were difficult. After learning about my uncle Roberto's involvement in destroying my marriage, I decided I needed to take action. I could not let him get away with what he had done to me, Nelson, and Lucas. I also needed to make sure Roberto understood there would be consequences for his actions. My first step was gathering evidence of Roberto's fraud. I contacted Elena directly using information Nelson had given me. Elena was initially reluctant to talk to me, but she agreed to meet after I explained that I was not trying to get her in trouble. Elena and I met via video call since she was still in Colombia. She confirmed everything Nelson had told me about Roberto paying her to break up my marriage. Elena provided me with copies of text messages between her and Roberto from 2018, as well as photos of money transfers Roberto had made to her bank account. Elena also gave me additional details about Roberto's plan that Nelson had not known. According to Elena, Roberto had been planning this scheme for months before Nelson's trip to Colombia. Roberto had been monitoring my social media accounts and asking my parents questions about my marriage during their regular phone calls. Roberto had specifically chosen the timing of Nelson's solo trip to Colombia as the perfect opportunity to execute his plan. He knew Nelson would be vulnerable and isolated in a foreign country where he did not speak the language fluently. Elena said Roberto had originally wanted her to claim that I was involved in drug trafficking, but Elena refused because she thought that accusation was too dangerous. They settled on the fake family story because it would damage my marriage without putting me at risk of criminal charges. After my conversation with Elena, I contacted an attorney in Chicago to discuss legal options. The attorney said Roberto's actions probably constituted wire fraud and conspiracy, but prosecuting him would be difficult because the crimes occurred partially in Colombia. The attorney suggested that my best option was to report Roberto to immigration authorities in both the United States and Colombia. Roberto's scheme to manipulate visa applications could result in him being banned from entering the United States and could affect his children's pending visa applications. I decided to file reports with both immigration agencies. I provided them with all the evidence Elena had given me, along with detailed statements about how Roberto's fraud had affected my family. The attorney said these investigations could take months or years to resolve, but Roberto would likely face serious consequences. While I was dealing with the legal aspects of Roberto's fraud, I also had to decide what to do about Nelson's continued request to meet Lucas. Nelson had been sending me messages almost daily asking about when he could see his son. I discussed the situation with Ben multiple times over several weeks. Ben said he would support whatever decision I made, but he thought I should consider what would be best for Lucas in the long term. Ben pointed out that Lucas was getting older and would soon start asking more questions about his biological father. Ben suggested that I talk to Lucas about Nelson before making any decisions. He thought Lucas deserved to know that his biological father wanted to meet him, even if I ultimately decided against allowing contact. I had a conversation with Lucas about his biological father one evening after dinner. I explained that his father had lived far away for many years but had recently contacted me asking to meet Lucas. I asked Lucas how he felt about the possibility of meeting his biological father. Lucas was quiet for a while before asking why his father had not wanted to meet him before now. I explained that his father had made some mistakes when Lucas was a baby and had been living in a different state. Lucas asked if his father was a bad person, and I said his father had made poor decisions but was not necessarily a bad person. Lucas then asked if meeting his biological father would mean that Ben would not be his stepfather anymore. I assured Lucas that Ben would always be part of our family regardless of what happened with his biological father. Lucas said he was curious about his father but did not want anything to change with our current family situation. After that conversation, I decided to give Nelson one opportunity to meet Lucas under very controlled circumstances. I contacted Nelson and told him he could meet Lucas for 2 hours at a public park with Ben and me present. I made it clear that this meeting was not a guarantee of ongoing contact and that any future relationship would depend entirely on how this initial meeting went. Nelson agreed to my conditions and seemed grateful for any opportunity to meet his son. We arranged to meet at a large park with playgrounds the following Saturday afternoon. The meeting was awkward from the beginning. Nelson arrived with a large bag of expensive toys and gifts for Lucas, which immediately made the interaction feel forced and artificial. Lucas was polite but clearly uncomfortable with the attention from this stranger who claimed to be his father. Nelson tried too hard to connect with Lucas by asking rapid-fire questions about school, sports, and hobbies. Lucas answered politely but kept looking at Ben and me for reassurance. When Nelson suggested they go play on the playground equipment together, Lucas said he preferred to stay near Ben and me. After about an hour, it became obvious that Lucas was not enjoying the interaction. Nelson was becoming frustrated that Lucas was not responding enthusiastically to his attempts at bonding. Nelson made several comments about how Lucas seemed shy and needed to open up more to his real father. The final straw came when Nelson told Lucas that he had missed him every day for the past 7 years and hoped they could spend more time together soon. Lucas looked confused and asked why Nelson had missed him if he had chosen not to visit before now. Nelson looked at me and said I should explain to Lucas why they had been separated. When I refused to discuss the details of our divorce in front of Lucas, Nelson became visibly agitated. He said Lucas deserved to know the truth about why his father had been absent from his life. I told Nelson that our time was up and started gathering our things to leave. Nelson asked when he could see Lucas again, and I said I needed time to think about whether additional meetings would be beneficial for Lucas. Nelson became upset and said he had rights as Lucas's biological father. He said he had been patient and cooperative, but he expected more access to his son going forward. When Ben stepped forward and told Nelson to lower his voice, Nelson accused Ben of trying to replace him as Lucas's father. Lucas became upset seeing the adults argue and asked if we could go home. I took Lucas's hand and started walking toward our car. Nelson followed us and kept talking loudly about his parental rights and how he was being treated unfairly. Ben stayed between Nelson and Lucas while we walked to the car. Nelson continued arguing until we drove away. The entire experience was traumatic for Lucas, who spent the car ride asking why his biological father had gotten so angry. When we got home, Lucas told me he did not want to see his biological father again. He said the man made him uncomfortable and seemed mean. Lucas asked if Nelson would try to take him away from Ben and me, and I assured him that would never happen. I decided that Nelson had demonstrated exactly why he should not have access to Lucas. His inability to respect boundaries, his sense of entitlement, and his willingness to create conflict in front of a child proved that he was not ready to be a responsible parent. I sent Nelson a text message the next day explaining that there would be no further contact between him and Lucas. I told Nelson that his behavior at the park had been inappropriate and that Lucas had asked not to see him again. Nelson responded with a series of angry messages accusing me of poisoning Lucas against him and threatening to take legal action to establish his parental rights. He said I had orchestrated the entire meeting to fail and had never intended to give him a real chance with his son. I blocked Nelson's number and all of his known email addresses. I also contacted the attorney who had helped me with the Roberto situation to discuss options if Nelson tried to pursue legal action regarding custody or visitation. The attorney said Nelson would have difficulty establishing parental rights after 7 years of voluntary absence, especially since he had never paid child support or attempted to contact Lucas before now. The attorney recommended documenting all of Nelson's threatening communications in case we needed them for a restraining order. Since blocking Nelson's contact, I have not heard from him directly. However, he did contact my parents in Colombia asking them to convince me to let him see Lucas. My parents told Nelson they supported my decision and would not interfere in the situation. Lucas has not asked about his biological father since the park meeting. He seems relieved that the stressful situation is over and has gone back to his normal routine. Ben has been especially supportive of Lucas during this time and has made sure Lucas knows that nothing about our family dynamic will change. As for Roberto, the immigration investigations are still ongoing. I have not had any direct contact with him since our phone conversation 2 months ago. My parents told me that Roberto's children's visa applications have been put on hold while authorities review the allegations against him. My mother said Roberto has been calling other family members trying to get them to convince me to drop the immigration reports. Roberto apparently told my cousins that I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding and that his actions had not really hurt anyone. I have no intention of dropping the reports against Roberto. What he did to my family was calculated and cruel, and he deserves to face consequences for his actions. The fact that he is still trying to minimize his responsibility shows that he has not learned anything from this experience. Looking back on everything that has happened over the past few months, I feel confident that I made the right decisions regarding both Nelson and Roberto. Nelson had his chance to prove he could be a positive presence in Lucas's life, and he failed dramatically. Roberto's scheme destroyed my first marriage and caused years of pain for me and Lucas, and he needs to be held accountable for that. I am grateful that Ben has been so supportive throughout this entire ordeal. He never made me feel guilty for wanting to give Nelson a chance to meet Lucas, and he never tried to influence my decisions about how to handle Roberto's fraud. Ben's steady presence has helped Lucas and me get through this difficult period. Our family is stronger now than it was before all of this drama started. Lucas knows he can trust Ben and me to protect him from people who might try to hurt or manipulate him. I have learned that I need to be more careful about who I allow into our lives and more willing to cut off people who prove they cannot be trusted. I hope this is the end of the situation with both Nelson and Roberto. I want to focus on building a positive future with Ben and Lucas without having to deal with people from my past who bring nothing but chaos and pain. Update 3: This will be my final update about the situation with my ex-husband Nelson and my uncle Roberto. Several important things have happened over the past 3 months that I wanted to share before closing this chapter of my life completely. The immigration investigations into Roberto's fraud have moved forward more quickly than I expected. Last month, I received a call from an immigration officer informing me that Roberto has been permanently banned from entering the United States. His children's visa applications have also been denied due to their father's fraudulent activities. The officer told me that Roberto's case was considered particularly serious because he had deliberately interfered with a legitimate marriage between a U.S. citizen and a legal immigrant. The authorities also discovered that Roberto had been involved in other questionable immigration schemes over the years, which made his punishment more severe. My mother called me a few days after Roberto received his ban notice. She said Roberto had been calling family members in Colombia crying and begging them to convince me to somehow reverse the immigration decision. Roberto apparently told my cousins that losing his chance to bring his children to America was destroying his family. My mother said she told Roberto that he had brought this punishment on himself through his own selfish and cruel actions. She said Roberto tried to argue that he had never intended for Nelson to completely abandon me, but my mother pointed out that Roberto's intentions did not matter given the actual consequences of his scheme. I felt no sympathy for Roberto when I learned about his immigration ban. He had calculated every step of his plan to destroy my marriage for his own benefit. The fact that his scheme backfired and prevented his own children from getting visas seemed like appropriate justice. My father called Roberto directly after learning about the immigration ban. My father told Roberto that he was no longer welcome at family gatherings and that no one in our immediate family would help him with any future immigration attempts. My father said Roberto deserved everything that had happened to him and more. Roberto's wife called my mother a few weeks later asking if there was anything the family could do to help Roberto's children get visas through a different process. My mother explained that Roberto's immigration fraud had permanently damaged his children's chances of coming to America legally. Roberto's wife started crying and said Roberto had ruined their family's future for nothing. I have not spoken to Roberto directly since our phone conversation 6 months ago, and I have no intention of ever communicating with him again. As far as I am concerned, Roberto is no longer part of my family. His willingness to destroy my marriage and abandon his pregnant niece for money showed me exactly what kind of person he really is. The situation with Nelson has also reached a final resolution. About 6 weeks ago, Nelson hired a lawyer and filed a petition in family court requesting visitation rights with Lucas. Nelson's attorney argued that he had been deceived about me by Roberto and should not be punished for being the victim of fraud. My attorney responded by filing detailed documentation of Nelson's 7-year absence from Lucas's life, his failure to pay any child support, and his inappropriate behavior during our supervised meeting at the park. We also provided evidence that Nelson had voluntarily signed away his parental rights when he agreed to the divorce without requesting custody or visitation. The family court judge reviewed all the evidence and interviewed Lucas privately about his feelings regarding contact with his biological father. Lucas told the judge that he did not want to see Nelson again and that Nelson had made him uncomfortable during their only meeting. The judge ultimately denied Nelson's petition for visitation rights. The ruling stated that Nelson had voluntarily abandoned his parental responsibilities for 7 years and that forcing contact between Nelson and Lucas would not be in the child's best interests. The judge also noted that Lucas had expressed clear preferences about not wanting contact with Nelson. Nelson's attorney tried to argue that Nelson deserved another chance to build a relationship with his son, but the judge said Nelson had already been given that opportunity during our park meeting and had failed to demonstrate appropriate parenting behavior. After losing his court case, Nelson sent me one final email through his attorney. The message said he accepted the court's decision and would not pursue any further legal action regarding Lucas. Nelson said he hopes someday Lucas would be curious enough about his biological father to initiate contact voluntarily. Nelson also apologized again for believing Roberto's lies about me and for abandoning our family 7 years ago. He said he understood why I could not forgive him and that he respected my decision to protect Lucas from further contact with him. I felt relieved when I received Nelson's final message because it meant the legal battle was over and Nelson had accepted that he would not be part of Lucas's life. I had been worried that Nelson might continue fighting for visitation rights for years, which would have been stressful and expensive for our family. Lucas knows that his biological father tried to get court-ordered visits but that the judge decided Lucas did not have to see him. Lucas seemed pleased with the judge's decision and said he was glad he would not have to worry about seeing Nelson again. Ben has been incredible throughout this entire legal process. He attended every court hearing with me and helped Lucas understand what was happening without making him feel scared or guilty. Ben also offered to formally adopt Lucas if that would provide additional legal protection against future contact attempts from Nelson. I have decided to pursue Ben's adoption of Lucas next year when the waiting period for Nelson's abandoned parental rights is complete. Lucas is excited about the idea of Ben becoming his legal father and changing his last name to match Ben's. Lucas said he wants to make it official that Ben is his real dad. Looking back on everything that has happened over the past year, I am grateful that Nelson's return to our lives ultimately led to positive outcomes. Learning about Roberto's fraud allowed me to get justice against him and ensure he could never manipulate our family again. Nelson's failed attempt to reconnect with Lucas proved definitively that cutting him out of our lives had been the right decision. I also learned important lessons about trusting my instincts and protecting my family from people who bring chaos and drama into our lives. I realized that I do not owe second chances to people who have proven they cannot be trusted, even if they claim to have changed or learned from their mistakes. Ben and Lucas are my real family now. We have built a stable, loving home together based on mutual respect and genuine care for each other. We do not need people from my past who only bring pain and complications into our peaceful life. I will not be posting any more updates about this situation because I consider it completely resolved. Nelson and Roberto are both permanently out of our lives, and Lucas will grow up knowing he is wanted and protected by parents who put his well-being first. For anyone dealing with similar situations involving manipulative family members or absent parents trying to return, I recommend trusting your instincts about what is best for your children. Do not let guilt or family pressure convince you to give people access to your kids if those people have already proven they cannot be trusted. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your children is to keep toxic people away from them, even if those people share DNA. Lucas deserves to grow up in a drama-free environment surrounded by people who have earned the right to be called family. Thank you to everyone who commented on my posts and offered support during this difficult time. Reading your responses helped me feel confident about the decisions I made to protect my son and get justice against the people who had wronged our family. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My dad chose my cruel stepmom over me for years. When I refused to invite her to my wedding, he tried to destroy my reputation. I'm Lana, 28F, and I'm getting married next spring to my fiancé, Alex, 30M. My life has been a roller coaster, and I need to share my story and ask for advice about my upcoming wedding. My childhood was pretty normal until I was 10. Mom and dad were happily married, and I was their only child. We lived in a cozy house in the suburbs, and my weekends were filled with trips to the park, baking cookies with mom, and watching dad work on his model trains in the basement. Mom was a kindergarten teacher, and dad worked as an accountant. They both doted on me, and I felt loved and secure. Everything changed when mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. I was only 9 when we found out, and I didn't fully understand what was happening. I just knew that mom was sick and spent a lot of time in the hospital. Dad tried his best to keep things normal for me, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Mom fought hard for a year, but the cancer was relentless. She passed away just after my 10th birthday. I remember the day clearly. Dad picked me up from school, his eyes red and puffy, and told me that mom had gone to heaven. The next few months were a blur of grief and confusion. Dad struggled to cope with mom's death. He started drinking more and became distant. I often found myself eating microwave dinners alone while he sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in hand. Our once happy home became quiet and somber. When I was 12, Dad announced that he'd met someone new, Vivian, 50F. She was a divorced real estate agent with 2 kids from her previous marriage, Zach, 32M, and Mia, 26F. Dad said Vivian made him happy again, and I should be excited about having a new mom and siblings. At first, I tried to be open to the idea. I missed having a mother figure, and part of me hoped Vivian would fill that void. But from the moment I met her, something felt off. She was polite when Dad was around, but when we were alone, she'd give me these cold, calculating looks that made me uncomfortable. Dad and Vivian got married when I was 13. They decided we'd all move into a new house together, a fresh start, Dad called it. I had to leave behind the only home I'd ever known, the one filled with memories of mom. It felt like I was losing her all over again. From the beginning, it was clear that Vivian favored her own children. Zach and Mia got the bigger bedrooms in our new house, while I was relegated to a small room next to the laundry. Vivian decorated their rooms with care, buying new furniture and letting them choose the paint colors. My room remained bare, with just my old bed and dresser. Family activities became a source of anxiety for me. Vivian would plan trips to amusement parks, beach vacations, and skiing holidays, but I was always left behind with my grandparents or Aunt Sarah. The first time it happened, I overheard Vivian telling Dad that I was too young for the trip they had planned. I was 14, while Mia was 12. It didn't make sense, but Dad didn't question it. As time went on, the exclusion became more blatant. Vivian would discuss vacation plans right in front of me, not even pretending to include me anymore. When I asked Dad why I couldn't go, he'd make excuses about not having enough money for everyone, or saying I'd be bored with grown-up activities. But I'd see pictures later of Zach and Mia having fun at water parks or ski resorts. Birthdays and holidays were especially tough. While Zach and Mia received expensive gifts like the latest gaming consoles or designer clothes, I'd get nothing or just small, impersonal items like generic gift cards. One Christmas, I received a pack of socks while Mia got a brand new iPhone. When I was 15, I overheard Vivian telling Dad that buying me presents was a waste of money since I wasn't really part of the family. Dad weakly protested, but ultimately did nothing. School became another battleground. Vivian refused to buy me new school supplies or clothes, saying I should learn the value of money. I started babysitting and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood from the age of 14 just to afford basic necessities. Meanwhile, Mia got a new wardrobe every season and the latest gadgets. Zach, who was in college by then, had a car bought for him and his tuition fully paid. The worst part was the constant emotional abuse. Vivian never missed an opportunity to belittle me. She'd criticize my appearance, saying things like, "No wonder you don't have a boyfriend, who'd want to date such a plain Jane." Or "You should really try to lose some weight, honey. No one likes a chubby girl." She'd compare me unfavorably to Mia, who was naturally slim and outgoing. Vivian would also make snide comments about my intelligence. If I brought home a B on a test, she'd say, "Well, I guess you're just not as smart as your mother." What a shame. She told me that my mom would be disappointed in me and that I was a burden to everyone. These words cut deep, especially since I had few memories of my mom to counter these claims. Zach and Mia, following Vivian's lead, joined in the emotional torment. They'd mock me at dinner, making jokes about my clothes or my lack of friends. Mia would sometimes borrow my things without asking and return them damaged, if at all. Once, she took a necklace that had belonged to my mom and lost it. When I got upset, Vivian accused me of being materialistic and selfish. I tried to talk to Dad about what was happening, but he always brushed off my concerns. He'd say things like, "Vivian is just trying her best, or you need to try harder to fit in with the family." It was like he couldn't, or wouldn't, see how I was being treated. The breaking point came when I was 17. I had a small box of mementos from my mom, photos, a few letters she'd written to me, and some pieces of jewelry she'd left for me. I kept this box hidden in my closet, only taking it out when I really needed to feel close to her. One day, I came home from school to find my room in disarray. The box was open on my bed, and everything inside was destroyed. The photos were torn, the letters shredded, and the jewelry was missing. I was devastated and furious. I confronted Vivian, and she smirked, saying, "Oops, I must have accidentally thrown those old things away while cleaning. You really should keep your room tidier, Lana." I lost it. I yelled at her, calling her a cruel, heartless witch and accusing her of deliberately destroying my only connection to my mom. Dad came home during our argument. Instead of defending me or trying to understand what had happened, he grounded me for disrespecting my stepmother. He didn't even ask to see the destroyed mementos or consider that Vivian might be lying. That night, I packed my bags and left. I couldn't stay in that house for one more minute. I went to my Aunt Sarah's place. She was my mom's younger sister, and we'd always been close. When I showed up on her doorstep in tears and told her everything that had been happening, she was horrified. She immediately agreed to let me stay with her and help me finish my last year of high school. For years after that, I had no contact with Dad or Vivian's family. I worked hard, put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, and started building a life for myself. Aunt Sarah became my rock, supporting me through the tough times and celebrating my achievements. It wasn't until I was 24 that Dad reached out to me. He said he wanted to reconnect and apologized for not being there for me. At first, I ignored his messages. I was doing well in my career, had a good group of friends, and had started dating Alex. I didn't feel like I needed Dad in my life anymore. But after talking it over with Aunt Sarah and Alex, I agreed to meet Dad for coffee. He cried when he saw me, telling me how sorry he was and how much he'd missed me. He said he'd realized how badly he'd failed me as a father and wanted to make amends. I was wary but agreed to give him a chance, telling him that if he wanted a relationship, he'd have to earn it. Over the past 4 years, we've slowly rebuilt our relationship. We started with occasional phone calls, then progressed to monthly dinners. Last year, he attended my college graduation ceremony, and it felt like a turning point. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a dad again. Now, with my wedding to Alex approaching, I'm faced with a difficult decision. I want Dad at my wedding, but I absolutely don't want Vivian, Zach, or Mia there. They've never apologized or shown any remorse for how they treated me. The thought of them being at my wedding makes me feel sick. I talked to Dad about this, explaining that I wanted him there as a guest, but not Vivian or her kids. At first, he seemed understanding, but then he started pressuring me to invite them. He said they're his family too, and it would be unfair to exclude them. When I stood firm, he threatened not to come if they weren't invited. I was hurt and angry. I told him, if you choose them over me again, then don't bother coming. Our relationship will be over. He tried to argue, but I cut him off and said I didn't want to hear from him again unless he was ready to respect my wishes. Now, my phone is blowing up with messages from Dad's side of the family. They're saying I should be the bigger person and invite everyone to keep the peace. But I don't want to. This is my wedding day, and I don't want it ruined by people who made my life miserable for years. Alex and his family fully support my decision. My Aunt Sarah says I have every right to invite only people who truly care about me. But I can't help feeling conflicted. Am I wrong for not inviting Vivian and her kids? Should I give in to keep the peace, or stand my ground? First update, it's been a week since my last post, and things have escalated far beyond what I ever imagined. I'm still in shock, but I wanted to update you all on what's happened. The day after I posted, I woke up to hundreds of notifications on my phone. Somehow, Vivian had found out about the wedding situation in my Reddit post. She'd shared it on her social media, twisting the story to make herself look like the victim of an ungrateful stepdaughter. Her post went viral in our local community. Suddenly, I was getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, old classmates, former neighbors, even some of Dad's co-workers. Most of them were nasty, calling me selfish and cruel for excluding my family from the wedding. What hurt the most were the lies Vivian was spreading. She claimed she'd always tried to be a loving mother to me, but I'd rejected her from the start. She said she'd spent years trying to include me in family activities, but I'd always refused. According to her, I was a troubled child who lashed out at everyone and made up stories for attention. Vivian painted a picture of herself as a patient stepmother who had tried everything to bond with me. She talked about how she'd supposedly stayed up late helping me with homework, which never happened, how she tried to take me shopping for mother-daughter bonding time, also never happened, and how she'd always made sure to include me in family photos. I have years of family photos that prove otherwise. She even went as far as to claim that she'd tried to help me deal with my grief over my mom's death, saying she'd suggested therapy and support groups that I'd refused. In reality, any mention of my mom was met with scorn or dismissal in that household. The worst part? Dad was backing her up. He posted a long message about how heartbroken he was that his daughter was tearing the family apart. He painted himself as a devoted father who'd always put his children first, conveniently forgetting all the years he'd ignored my pain. Dad's post talked about how he'd always tried to be fair to all his children, biological and step. He claimed that any perceived favoritism towards Zach and Mia was just my imagination, and that he'd always made sure I had everything I needed. He even had the audacity to say that he'd respected my decision to live with Aunt Sarah, as if I'd had any real choice in the matter. I was overwhelmed and didn't know how to respond. Alex suggested I take a break from social media, but the damage was already done. People were sharing Vivian's post and adding their own stories about what a difficult child I'd been. Old classmates chimed in with stories about how I was always moody or antisocial in school, conveniently forgetting that I was dealing with the loss of my mother and the abuse at home. Former neighbors talked about how they'd always seen Vivian trying to include me in activities, neglecting to mention the times they'd seen me left behind when the rest of the family went on trips. Then, 3 days ago, I received a cease and desist letter from a lawyer representing Vivian and Dad. They claimed my Reddit post was defamatory and demanded I delete it and make a public apology. If I didn't comply, they threatened to sue me for damages. I was terrified. I couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle, especially with the wedding expenses. I called Aunt Sarah in tears, not knowing what to do. She immediately came over and helped me calm down. Then she made a call to her friend, Lisa, 50F, who happens to be a lawyer specializing in defamation cases. Lisa reviewed the letter and my original post. She assured me that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. She also pointed out that I hadn't named anyone in my post, so it would be hard for them to prove it was about them specifically. With Lisa's help, I drafted a response to their lawyer. We stated that I stood by everything in my post, and if they pursued legal action, I was prepared to provide evidence of the abuse I'd suffered, including testimonies from teachers and neighbors who'd witnessed it. Yesterday, I received another bombshell. My cousin Jake, 25M, reached out to me. He's Dad's nephew, and we were close as kids before Vivian came into the picture. Jake said he'd seen Vivian's post and knew it was all lies. He revealed that when we were teenagers, he'd caught Vivian badmouthing me to other family members at a reunion. He'd always felt guilty for not speaking up then, but now he wanted to help. Jake shared a memory from when I was 15. There was a big family reunion, and I wasn't there because Vivian had told everyone I was too busy with a school project to attend. In reality, I hadn't even been told about the reunion. Jake overheard Vivian telling some aunts that I was a problem child who was tearing the family apart with my attention-seeking behavior. Jake offered to make a public post corroborating my story. He said he'd witnessed how Vivian treated me on several occasions and was willing to go on record about it. I was touched by his support but worried about the backlash he might face. As of now, I'm waiting to see how Vivian and Dad will respond to my lawyer's letter. Alex and I have decided to postpone making any wedding decisions until this blows over. We're considering having a small destination wedding instead, with just our closest friends and supportive family members. I'm still processing everything that's happened. The public shaming and threats have been overwhelming, but I'm trying to stay strong. Aunt Sarah, Alex, and his family have been incredibly supportive. They keep reminding me that I'm not alone in this. I'll update again when I have more information. Thank you all for your advice and support. It means more than you know. Second update, it's been a month since my last update, and a lot has changed. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened, but I wanted to share the latest developments with you all. First, the good news, Vivian and Dad backed down after receiving our lawyer's response. Lisa thinks they realized they didn't have a strong case and were bluffing with their legal threats. They've gone silent on social media, and the wave of public shaming has mostly died down. Jake did end up making a public post supporting me. He shared specific instances of Vivian's mistreatment that he'd witnessed, including the time he overheard her convincing Dad not to pay for my school trip while simultaneously planning an expensive vacation for Zach and Mia. His post caused quite a stir in the family, with several relatives reaching out to apologize for not seeing what was happening when I was younger. Jake's post also included a story from when I was 16. There was a family Christmas party at my grandparents' house, and Vivian had told everyone I couldn't come because I was sick. In reality, she'd never told me about the party. Jake had stopped by our house to drop off a present for me and found me alone, perfectly healthy, while the rest of the family was at the party. When he asked why I wasn't there, I broke down and told him everything. He felt guilty for years for not speaking up then. Now, for the unexpected turn of events. About 2 weeks ago, I received a message from Mia, my stepsister. She asked if we could meet in person to talk. After discussing it with Alex and Aunt Sarah, I agreed to meet her in a public cafe. When I saw Mia, I hardly recognized her. The confident, sneering girl I remembered looked small and nervous. As soon as we sat down, she burst into tears and started apologizing. Between sobs, she told me a story that shocked me to my core. Apparently, Vivian had been manipulating all of us for years. She told Mia and Zach that I hated them and was trying to turn Dad against them. She convinced them that the only way to protect their place in the family was to push me out. Mia said she'd always felt guilty about how they treated me, but Vivian would punish her if she showed me any kindness. Mia revealed that Vivian had a history of this behavior. She'd done something similar with their father's children from a previous marriage, which was why they had no contact with their older half-siblings. Mia had recently reconnected with her half-sister and learned the truth about their shared history with Vivian. She told me about incidents I'd forgotten or never knew about. Like the time when I was 14 and had won a school art competition. Mia had wanted to congratulate me, but Vivian told her I was gloating about my win and trying to make Mia feel bad about her own lack of artistic talent. Or the time when Mia had found my destroyed mementos from my mom in the trash and Vivian had convinced her I'd done it myself in a fit of rage. I was stunned. While this didn't excuse Mia's behavior, it certainly explained a lot. She told me she's been in therapy for the past year, working through the emotional abuse she'd suffered at Vivian's hands. She didn't expect forgiveness but wanted me to know the truth. As for Zach and Dad, Mia said they're still under Vivian's influence. Zach refuses to believe anything negative about his mother and Dad. Well, Mia thinks he's too afraid of being alone to stand up to Vivian. This conversation with Mia has left me with mixed emotions. On one hand, I'm angry that it took her this long to reach out. On the other, I understand the courage it must have taken to break away from Vivian's control and face me. Alex and I have decided to go ahead with our original wedding plans. We're not inviting Vivian, Zach, or Dad, but we've left the door open for Mia to attend if she continues to show genuine remorse and a desire to make amends. Aunt Sarah has been my rock through all of this. She's walking me down the aisle, and we've planned a special tribute to my mom during the ceremony. We're going to have a locket with Mom's picture in my bouquet, and we've chosen her favorite flowers for the centerpieces. As for Dad, I've realized that I can't keep hoping he'll change. His actions have shown where his priorities lie, and I need to accept that and move on. It hurts, but I'm focusing on the family I've chosen, Alex, his parents, Aunt Sarah, and the friends who've stood by me. The wedding is in 3 months, and for the first time, I'm excited about it without any reservations. I feel like I'm finally closing a painful chapter of my life and starting a new one with people who truly love and support me. Thank you all for your advice and support throughout this journey. I'll post one final update after the wedding to let you know how it all turned out. Third update. Hello everyone, it's been 6 months since my last update, and as promised, I'm here to share how everything turned out. The wedding was absolutely beautiful. We had a small ceremony in a picturesque garden, surrounded by our closest friends and family. Aunt Sarah walked me down the aisle, and there wasn't a dry eye when we did the tribute to my mom. We had a photo of her on a special chair in the front row, with her favorite flowers. It felt like she was there with us. Mia did attend the wedding. In the months leading up to it, she continued to show genuine remorse and made efforts to make amends. She even helped with some of the wedding preparations. While we're not best friends, we're slowly building a positive relationship. On the wedding day, she gave me a heartfelt card and a locket that had belonged to her grandmother, a touching gesture to replace the one I'd lost years ago. The day wasn't without drama, though. About an hour before the ceremony, one of our guests spotted Dad lurking near the venue. Apparently, he'd found out the details from a loose-lipped relative. Thankfully, Alex's brothers quickly and quietly escorted him away before I even knew he was there. They told me about it after the reception, and I'm grateful they handled it without disrupting our day. As for Vivian and Zach, we haven't heard anything from them since the legal threats fizzled out. From what Mia has told us, Vivian is furious that Mia attended the wedding and has been trying to turn the rest of the family against her. On a happier note, cousin Jake and I have become quite close. He's been a great support, and it's nice to have a positive male family figure in my life. He and his girlfriend have become good friends with Alex and me, and we often double date. Jake has been helping me reconnect with other family members who were kept away by Vivian's lies. Alex and I are settling into married life wonderfully. We've bought a small house in a new city, away from all the drama. I've started a new job that I love, and Alex has been promoted at his company. We're talking about starting a family of our own in a couple of years, and I'm excited about the chance to create the loving home I didn't have growing up. Looking back on everything that's happened, I can hardly believe how much has changed in a year. While part of me is sad that I don't have the relationship with Dad that I always wanted, I'm at peace with it. I've realized that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who love and support you unconditionally. Aunt Sarah continues to be a huge part of our lives. She's like a mother to me, and Alex adores her too. We have dinner with her every Sunday, carrying on a tradition that she started when I first came to live with her as a teenager. As for Mia, we're taking things slow. We meet for coffee once a month and are slowly getting to know each other as adults, without Vivian's influence poisoning our relationship. It's not always easy, but I think we're both committed to trying. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and kind words helped me stay strong during some of the toughest moments. I'm closing this chapter of my life with a heart full of gratitude and hope for the future.